Okay. My name is Elijah Smith. I am doing a project for English 101 where we remix our last research paper into a different kind of media. For mine, I'm deciding to do a podcast interview questionnaire kind of ordeal. And today, for my paper, which is Solutions for the World's Water Pollution, I have invited Jake Welch, the president of the Finger Lakes Regional Watershed Alliance, to sit in a Zoom call with me, and I'm going to ask him some questions. All right. So Jake, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
No, that's fine, Elijah, and I'm honored that you picked me as somebody you wanted to talk to about these important topics.
Of course, yeah. First person who came to mind. So, the first question being, what is the Finger Lakes Regional Watershed Alliance?
Okay, well, it was formed back around the 2012 era. At that time, there was a lot of fracking that was going on in the state where they were injecting a lot of bad chemicals down into subsoils, and a big concern was that some of that was going to leach out into our Finger Lakes. There's 11 Finger Lakes, and the idea was, well, if we all band together, we'd have a larger voice in Albany. And eventually in 2014, fracking was banned in New York State, with our efforts, but a lot of other efforts from other environmental concerns. And since that time, it's kept together as a way of sharing information. Our lakes, uh, one lake association might have a success with something or a failure, and we share that in our monthly or bi-monthly meetings. And then we also interact with the New York State DEC that attends our meetings on a regular basis. Um, Also, New York State Federation of Lakes Association, they always attend our meetings. So it's a way to keep abreast of things going on in the state, grants, things like that. And we've also reached out to our political representatives, our governor's office, our assembly people, as well as our state senators, sharing with them some of our concerns. And we've done that over the past years.
Sure. So, at a, statewide scale, almost, though you're the Finger Lakes Regional Watershed Alliance, your outreach is at a statewide scale.
Very often, yes. And, also local concerns, but I think that is our primary purpose with our lake associations. A lot of them are small lake associations, having, the thought of contacting the governor's office or sitting down with a state senator, it just kind of behooves them. They're nice people, but they don't have a lot of background in that, and so we offer
Sure.
that to them.
And I think that's very much important. So I'm sure, though, I feel as though the problem's a little, well, the problems we face in our Finger Lakes and the water that is in New York State, I feel like they're not as voiced as much as they should be. So something like the watershed being in place is very important.
Thank you.
Would you mind just giving a brief description as to what fracking is for someone who might not know?
Well, they've always kept the chemicals a secret, but we know they're not the best things because they go down and they cause it's like injected with tons of water. So, they're using a lot of water resources to begin with that now get piped down into deep recesses, small cracks, and that's where the idea crack and frack that are in down in the earth, and then they are able to ignite the chemicals in a way that causes rupture or cracking, and then gases are able to come out of smaller pockets and into larger pockets and get sucked up and put into a natural gas resource for us. It's been done. It's being done in Pennsylvania, Texas, lots of other states, but New York State said, "Hey, let's put a hold on that until we could make sure what you guys are doing is safe for New York State environment."
Good. So just kind of diving a little more into this, why is protecting and preserving the Finger Lakes important to you specifically?
Okay, well, I'm grew up in Corning, New York, and my grandfather had a cottage on Cuca Lake, and the family gathered there. It meant a lot to us. We loved swimming and fishing in the lake, and how it brought the family together. And then when I raised my own family, I got a stayed at my mom's cottage on Cuca Lake, and eventually we bought a place myself and my wife on Seneca Lake. And to us, it's like all these beautiful things that have come into our life. And these are some of the, if you travel around, these really are some of the most beautiful lakes, and not just in the country, but worldwide. And, to pass this great gift on to my kids, and they may be onto their kids and grandchildren, it's highly important. So that's why I've jumped into the work I'm doing.
Right. It's like a cultural experience that should be shared generationally. You know,
Absolutely. Yeah.
something we've cultivated throughout the years that the lake experience being in the Finger Lakes is it's a feeling that we all kind of share, and that's why it's so important to preserve and protect them.
Yeah. And there's been a lot more population here than when I was a little tyke. So with that, some additional threats have arisen.
And the next question, kind of going into that, what are the current threats that the Finger Lakes are facing right now?
Yeah, well, we've got our fair share. Probably the biggest one that people talk about are harmful algal blooms that are poisonous. And if dogs drink the water, it kills them and they leave rashes. And they really are upsetting for people to look out there and see blue-green algae water instead of the nice blue water that we're famous for here.
Right.
Another thing are PFAS chemicals. They call them forever chemicals, tied to a lot of plastics, and they're all over the place now. But we're trying to get those more limited because of their health concerns with people. And then, you have small marine life absorbing them, and then fish eat the smaller marine life, and then people eat the fish. So, we're trying to make sure people stay healthy and don't have these forever chemicals that really can hurt people's health. Uh, Another thing is insecticides. Those are somewhat similar to the forever chemicals and can have injurious effects and go through the food chain in the same way. Uh, the other threat from agriculture is fertilizers. And yeah, if you fertilize a plant, it grows a lot more. So with the fertilizers, not just tied to harmful algal blooms with the phosphorus that is in them, but also lead to a lot of unwanted weed growth and something we call eutrophication, where yeah, if you have like a pond with a lot of weeds in it, that's and very green algae type water, that's eutrophication that's occurred, and we're trying to keep our lakes from that eutrophication. Road salt is something we're concerned about. Seneca Lake is one of the saltier lakes, just from actually, they might tie to some of the salt mining that's occurred here, right up behind where I live on Seneca in the Himrod area. And then finally, invasive species. We've seen zebra and quagga mussels come in, really change the lake. On the terrestrial end, spotted lanternfly, which can really clobber our uh, incredible grape fields that we have all around, and hurt our winery business, which has really been flourishing. So those are a list of some real important ones, just to mention a few. There's
Yeah.
more.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, hemlock woolly adelgid, that's something we're working on where the hemlock trees are really important to holding the soils on the creeks, keeping the waters cooler
Hmm.
that come into the lake. And they're under a real attack with this hemlock woolly adelgid that we're trying to get sprays out there and trying to combat that as well.
Yeah, I personally lived on Hugo Lake for about 6 years and worked at Hugo Lake State Park for 3 of those years. And I remember, catching people who would be visiting the area who are letting their dogs in the water and having to stop them and tell them about the blue-green algae that was in the water and how it could make their dog very sick. So it's a scary thing. And that's just one of the things you listed off. A lot of these problems are present, and it's crazy to think how something as small as what some people would consider small, but obviously in your profession it's a little different. Something as small as road salt is also affecting our lakes and having an impact. So it's just kind of interesting to think about. Um, Speaking of blue-green algae, what are some of the short and long-term effects that they have on the Finger Lakes? So I know we spoke of some
Well,
short-term effects, but
yeah.
what maybe some of the long-term effects you think we're seeing?
Yeah, well, certainly tourism has really come to the Finger Lakes. They call it the Napa, of the East, Napa Valley, with our great wineries and what how flourishing they're doing. Uh, but people come here because it's the lake water and the beauty. And if all of a sudden people are looking out and seeing, gosh, these are awful green, they're not good looking lakes, and I heard that stuff is poisonous down there, our tourism's going to get cut way back,
Right.
and that would really be a shame. Property values around the lakes have really gone up, and if you've got a lake that's great to go in and ski and fish and all those wonderful things, yeah, those property values are going to be sustained, but not if things go south on us. So yeah, there's both long-term and short-term effects from our harmful algal bloom problems.
Yeah, and it's not even directly environmental, so much so that it's our economy as well. The way it affects the nature of our home and who comes here and how often. Like you said, the lakes are beautiful, but if they're poisonous and green, people might not have that same idea of the Finger Lakes in upstate New York. So that's
Yeah.
a very interesting perspective. What are people and organizations doing to combat the blue-green algae?
Well, certainly our lake associations, all the Finger Lakes lake associations are hot on this topic. We in the past years, like I said, have been in touch with some of our senators, our governor, about the problems here. We've shown them pictures, and shown them how important the tourism is to the coffers of our state. Remind them of all that, but also our duty to preserve these natural resources. And so we've had some good responses. New York State DEC been allocated something like $50 million to try to combat some of these problems. We recently had another infusion of another $40 million to the soil and water conservation districts, all to try to do something as far as phosphorus coming down into our lake. They can do things like retention ponds where they hold the waters on top and they don't come flying down these steep hills and inundate us with as much sediments and phosphorus. Uh, there can be buffer zones to try to keep these fertilizers away from the streams. Uh, Cover crops are fantastic. They hold the soils. They make it so the farmers don't have to use fertilizers. They get nutrients put back into the soil by the cover crops, and they don't have to spread their fertilizers around, and it holds the soils because the farm people they want to hold those soils from coming down into the lake. It's a win-win situation there. So I would say that the primary people really that are taking it on are the soil and water conservation districts in the area.
Mhm.
I hope they can ramp up more employees, more equipment to do the great work that's set out in front of them to do.
And what do you like, just a follow-up question, what do you think the the problem is there with being able to have these resources allocated to these associations that are, in play and making these changes in order to preserve our natural resources? Or maybe
Yeah,
is
now
it
there are problems, and actually, I had to testify in Albany about some of this last year, and brought up the fact that there's sometimes unnecessary oversight. The soil and water conservation districts are very trained, and they know how to uh, take those actions that I've been mentioning, the retention pond, the cover crops. They know everything about that.
Mhm.
But if they're going to do something like a retention pond or line ditches, sometimes they have to go, well, often go to the DEC and ask if the project can be approved. And the DEC says, well, you're going to have to submit an engineering report. And that holds some of these important projects back, sometimes a year, sometimes 2 years. Uh, and and why is that happening? I mean, the soil and water conservation districts are not going to harm us. They're out there to help us. So it's kind of mind-boggling why they have to have DEC oversight, especially when they have certain rights and privileges under what they call a general permit, where they can do all sorts of things. They can't dam up a trout stream, something like that, but they can do all sorts of work without that unnecessary red tape. So um, I guess that's one thing that's kind of held back a lot of things we need to get done.
And that's a little frustrating because it seems as though that's an easy problem to resolve, but not being in the nitty-gritty of it, you don't really know what you're into unless you're in it.
Right.
Just from a
And
surface.
then there's always, right.
Yeah,
Everybody wants their turf protected.
I guess that's true. Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. But we have some important jobs that have to be done quickly here. And especially with that money, that large money I talked about, that's allocated like for 4 years or 5 years. And if it's not used, then it goes away. So it's a time for less red tape and more action.
Sure. And I know we kind of spoke about it, but just to briefly go back on it, what are some of the impacts that the nutrient and pesticide uses from the agricultural end have on the lakes directly? Um,
Yeah.
I know it's a problem with runoff and groundwater, but what exactly are the impacts that they have?
Yeah. And surface water is the problem. It's a very good question. So a lot of studies have confirmed that when a lot of phosphorus sent down into a lake water body, that it increases harmful algal blooms. That's a general statement. Harmful algal blooms are very, very complex. They vary from place to place on the planet, place to place in our state. And so there are some lakes like Canandaigua they have a very, very low amount of phosphorus, and they've been studying it, yet they have harmful algal blooms almost on par with some of our other lakes. And Skinny Atlas has very low phosphorus, and they'll still have harmful algal blooms. Uh, you got Honeoye, which is huge amounts of phosphorus, and they have the most severe blooms around. But it's just one of those things where you go, Uh, okay, so the agriculture industry says, well, you know, you think it's all from us, but how come lakes like Canandaigua are having harmful algal blooms?
Right.
And why are you blaming us? We're feeding the people in your state. Uh, and so that's their argument. Um, it's a tough question, but I would also say, well, no matter what, if you throw fertilizers into a lake, it does cause a lot of unwanted weed growth and that eutrophication I was talking about.
Right.
We don't want to have weed choked lakes, and I don't think anybody's argued that weed growth isn't tied to nutrient runoff and sediments running off into the lakes. So uh, in that area, we can say it's good for your nutrients to stay on your lands, right? And you
Mhm.
don't want to have to pay for fertilizers; it's expensive. So, and you don't want to lose your soils. Once that topsoil's gone, what are you going to grow?
Right.
So there's still a lot of win-win with let's keep the nutrients up on the farm properties, and you guys benefit, and we likely benefit, although we can't prove it always ties to harmful algal blooms. I
Sure.
hope I said that all in a way that's understandable.
Yeah, it is. So, I mean, the relation is somewhat there, but obviously there are instances like Canandaigua where we have algae blooms and there isn't a lot of agricultural use that can show as to why. But in
Yeah.
scenarios where there is a lot of agricultural use, the algae blooms in relation to that have been boosted. So it's kind of
Yeah.
like a tough judgment call, but I like how you guys are pitching it in the way that it's a win-win situation. It's still out of benefit for the farmers to keep those fertilizers on their land. And then
Yep.
what about pesticides? What impacts do
Uh,
pesticides?
okay. Well, um, we jumped heavily onto this, and there was it's called the Birds and Bees Act, where, and a few years from now, one of the key pesticides, which is put on seeds, both for corn and all sorts of whatever seeds that uh, farmers use, uh, they put a chemical on that, which is called it's a neonicotinoid, is sort of the general name for the different coatings, but they're a neurotoxin. So what happens when 90% of that is shed off after they're put in the ground? Water permeates, and these things just wash off, and they go into the groundwater and into the surface water, and they go into the soils. They kill off the worms, but as they trickle down into our lakes, the smallest of uh, animal life, the things like zooplankton, which are you'd look on a microscope to see them, but also things like small fish, crayfish, snails, they absorb these neurotoxins. And then it goes up the food chain until it eventually goes into a small fish and a larger fish, and then can actually, hurt people that are eating that. But it's also really devastating all of those other animals to keep our lakes healthy. So pesticides, they have to be, they still are needed. I mean, you can't grow crops with bugs that just clobber the farmers, but they're going to have to do more work and spend more time instead of just, it's on the seed coatings, everything is taken care of. They have to go out and do more targeted spraying and more targeted for what type of insect is causing the problem, and instead of just generically year after year. And there's a compounding. This stuff keeps coming off every year into the soils. More and more concentrations occur. So there'll be some spraying, and that's not perfect either, but it's found to be less harmful in the long run to both humans and our lakes and our water. So um, that's the thing that neurotoxins has been as far as a threat. But we've made some real inroads, and believe me, it took a lot of political pressure and a statewide type basis to turn our governor around to sign that bill, which went through both houses pretty well. But it was a tough fight, very tough fight
Well, I'm glad.
against some big money interests that were like Bayer and Monsanto and all that were behind putting those chemicals on the seeds.
And that's typically the problem is the money is behind it. And, you know, the thought
Mm.
is, that, well, we're thinking more towards, overhead than human health right now. So it's
Hmm.
not like they come out and say it, but by
Yeah.
actions, you can tell that's what the case is. And you
Yeah.
think maybe there would be, I guess, less harmful or more natural pesticide alternatives that could be introduced, but like it seems like pesticides usually have that bad connotation of being harmful to the surrounding environment,
Yeah.
so it's a shame.
Well, yeah, and it affected pollinators. I mean, that's why there was the Birds and Bees Act, and farmers need pollinators. We all
Right.
do. We don't want to kill the bees off and see what all the effects that happen from that. And then birds were eating the insects, and that killing off the birds too. So a lot of real good things will happen if we can put a little more limit on some of that.
Good.
But it was a great learning experience because I think it's just to see how much of a grassroots effort it took, and working with people upstate, downstate, all around that really got behind that bill. Some people who were movie stars, doctors
Wow.
that got to the governor, but it was quite an effort. It was really cool to be part of it.
That's really good to hear, actually, how
Yeah,
widespread that problem became,
yeah,
um it's sometimes you feel like it shouldn't have to go this far, but when it does and you have the people to back it, it definitely shows.
yeah. You need a good organization to stop that money stuff.
Good.
and we
Changing
had
the
it.
pace just a little bit. What do lake associations do to test the Finger Lakes water?
Okay. Well, there's a lot of things. One of the programs is called CSLAP, or Citizens Statewide Lake Assessment Program, where they get what we call citizen scientists. I've done this. We go out in your boat, you throw over what's called a sucky dish, a little round flat dish that's got a different, black and white on it, and you see how many feet it goes down before you can't see it anymore. Gives you a good idea of water clarity. And then you take water samples in the lake, and those are tested. Some by the Lake Association pays for it, and New York State helps pay for some of it as well. And that's run by the New York State Federation of Lake Associations, runs that program, which has just been a great way of giving feedback to New York State DEC as far as the health of the lakes. If you have a lot of that eutrophication, you don't see your sake dish, drop it down a few feet and it's like, oh, it's gone.
Yeah, right.
So it's a good way of letting the state know how the lakes are doing. And Seneca Lake Pure Waters, which I've been part of for years, was a past president of that. I was president for 3 years. They do an awful lot of stream sampling. That's actually how Seneca Pure Waters started off. Uh, Thinking that if we find some bad stuff in the streams, we can report it to the state and hopefully good things get done. But that's kind of a hope. Then there's finally the Waves program where they people can go out and actually scoop up insects with nets that are in the stream, and it gives all sorts of feedback as far as how healthy that stream is, and that's those insects get sent back into New York State. They get analyzed. They look at what's growing, what should be growing, and but that's an interesting program that's around as well. And those are citizens. We call them citizen scientists that are out there doing some good work to monitor the healthiness of our streams and our lake.
Well, that's pretty neat, and that kind of ties into the next question I was going to ask you. What are some of the things that people themselves can be doing in order to protect the Finger Lakes?
Okay, well,
That would be one of them.
first off, yeah, join a lake association. That almost every single lake has a lake association, and join it, become a member, send in the $25 a year or whatever that they charge. It's usually not much, but it shows you're, a strong support, grassroots type of support. And the more members we have in the lake associations, I can go to Albany and say, hey, as the president of Finger Lakes Alliance, you know, there's, 10,000 people that are tied to these lake associations. And that gives a strong voice when you're talking to somebody up in Albany. Um, the citizen science stuff, be a volunteer to go out there and do some of that testing that I mentioned.
Right.
There's another program called Lake Friendly Living that we got started on Canandaigua Lake, came to Seneca Lake, then spread to numerous other Finger Lakes. And that's a way that people can, they'll get the brochures, uh, you know, don't put fertilizer on your lawns, try to watch how runoff comes off your property. And there's a whole bunch of stuff, lake friendly living, rain barrels, collect, water there. If instead of just use it unnecessarily. Different things that are part of that lake friendly living program. So you definitely can get involved. I kind of live by a motto that if you see something that you don't feel you like, just don't ignore it. You
Right.
you got to get out there and do something to make a difference. So yeah, jump in if you care about the lakes, then be a member of your lake association and volunteer what time you have. Sometimes you don't have to volunteer that much time, but then you get in retirement years, you do have more time, like I have, and you might get stuck for a little bit more.
Become president, even.
Yeah, I warn you, but it is rewarding.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
it's definitely interesting to watch the progress, I'm sure. Even
yeah.
if it's little battles that you're winning, yeah, everything counts. So, what do you feel as though we are lacking in order to make a difference in the current state of the Finger Lakes
Okay.
in terms of
Well,
resources,
y-
research, money, public
yep.
recognition?
I think you hit right on it. Our biggest problem by far is the harmful algal blooms. And as we discussed before, uh, they're curious creatures and they vary and they haven't figured them out. But I tell people our whole planet is not covered with harmful algal blooms. There is something which keeps them in check. And it varies where the locations are, but nature is keeping them in check somehow. And we have to look into that more. Research, research, research. If you don't understand something, how are you going to stop it?
Right.
And they have like the Water Resource Institute, which is stationed over in Cornell. They work on all sorts of problems with the Hudson River. Not that that's not important work, but they're located in the Finger Lakes and they are starting to do a little bit of work around here, but we need that type of level of academic research. Cornell, Hobart William Smith has been involved in it, but lots more work in the research area, I think, is absolutely critical. And so we have a focus and a direction in where we're going with harmful algal blooms.
Good.
Yeah.
Perfect. Um, and just to wrap us up here, the Zoom call just let me know that it would be shutting down in a few minutes. So,
Okay.
do you feel as though the health of the Finger Lakes have a bright future in the current condition they are in, or do you think some of the changes we just mentioned need to be heavily implemented in order to get there?
Yeah.
We're on a
You
good
know, I,
track.
if I can, I'll try to make it short, but what I have noticed in the last couple of years is how fast our lakes can change due to these threats. Um, when I came here, and this is a microcosm of time, we came on this lake. There were all sorts of fish out in front of my dock. And all of a sudden, in came zebra mussels, and the lake changed a whole bunch, cleared up. But then we had all sorts of problems with algal blooms. And this last year, Cladophora came and just the seaweed was gone. And then in came round gobies. And there's been all these other changes happening with the zebra mussels getting, and it's all can happen in like a year or two or even in 10 years. So these threats with climate change, warming, more storms, our lakes can change quickly. And we got to realize how important it is to protect them with everything we got. And if you don't believe it, well, just watch what can happen. That's I out there snorkeling and swimming and looking off my dock and going, wow, yeah, these lakes can change. Some of them are big like Seneca or Cayuga. Some are small, but they all can change and they
Right.
can change quick. And yep, we got to put our backs into it. So with
Perfect.
that, there could be a good future. Otherwise, maybe not.
So we're working on it. We're almost
There
there.
you go. It's worth the
Yeah,
effort.
I think so. And I think, the more we talk about it, the more we put these ideas into people's heads and get them talking about it with other people, the more they'll be recognized and the more outcome there will be because of the dedication and contribution we'll be making towards it. So
Yeah, yeah. We need old people like me and we need young people with good energy like you.
well, thank you very much, Jake, and thank you for joining me
Oh, you're
today.
welcome.
This has been great.
All right.
You've answered
Okay,
everything.
my pleasure.
I hope you have a great day and thanks again. Take
All
care.
right. Bye-bye, Elijah.